This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode, alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with masters of horror about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. And today's episode is the special This is Horror Awards. We are announcing the winners in the This is Horror Awards 2020, and we're speaking to the majority of them, and those who could not join us, we've got a little audio clip, so it's an exciting time, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Pastorella. How's it going, Bob?
Man, Michael, it is great, and I am really excited to reveal the winners of the 2020 This is Horror Awards. The competition was fierce, and we have, thanks to our readers, we narrowed it down, and we've got the best of the best. And I think everyone's really going to be surprised and enjoy, and just enjoy this whole thing.
I think so. Well, before we get into it, a little bit of an advert break.
Winner of the Indies Today 2020 Best Horror Award, Michael Jess Alexander's Boarded Windows Dead Leaves is a tour de force horror collection of tales meant to terrify. Alexander's writing adds a twist of wryness to the reader's smugly satisfied smile, says reader's favorite. Fire Fiction says, you'll feel at home with these stories, which certainly offer an entertaining and macabre read. Pick up Boarded Windows Dead Leaves on Amazon and other retailers, also now available as an incredible audiobook experience courtesy of Spooky House Press.
Being an independent publisher, we are just like you. We share the same passion, the same love for horror fiction. We believe in the incredible work being created, unnoticed by the mainstream. And we want to share it with the world. We are the Sinister Horror Company.
And we are back. And so now it is time to announce the winner of the Novel of the Year in the This is Horror Awards 2020. And the winner is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And so now we are going to hear a little message from Stephen Graham Jones.
Hello, Michael, Bob, everybody listening, anybody else guesting on this episode. Man, this is such an honor for the Only Good Indians to be getting This is Horror Award. It means a lot. It's always these awards are always a tight competition. And it's just an honor to be listed at all, So to end up lucking into the award itself, wow. Thank you. So honored. Big thanks to my agent, BJ Robbins, the publicist who got it out there to the world, Lauren Jackson, and my editor at Saga, Joe Monty, and everybody at Saga, Gallery Books, Simon & Schuster. Thanks, everybody, for reading this book. It means everything.
Well, it's always great to hear from Stephen, and I mean, what a worthy novel of the year, and a very unique one that, talks about things from an interesting perspective. I mean, it follows 4 American Indian men, and the horror is real in this one, Bob.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt. I remember the first time I read it, and I get to that part that I think everyone has gotten to when they've read it. And It's almost like and it's not almost, he did. He wrote it like a jump scare in the middle of the book. And it really it had a very, very strong impact, and I was like, whoa, this is off the chains. And it's just, it is an incredible book. It's worthy of the award, no doubt.
Yeah. As a result of reading this book, if someone invited you elk hunting, would you go?
Well, I mean, if it's indoors, okay, maybe. But,
Indoor elk hunting. What the fuck?
I don't do the camping roughing it experience, and I'm not really. I don't know. Hunting is a weird thing for me. I'm not a vegetarian. I should be, but I'm not. I'm unable to give up meat. And I do like the to eat wild game and stuff like that. But is to me, I don't think I can handle hunting. I really don't think I could do it. I can read about it, but doing it myself, I'm sorry, I'm just not gonna. I can't get that. I can't get that street cred. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you don't want to go hunting in a Stephen Graham Jones story, that's for damn sure.
No. Shoot, man, I don't want to do anything in any of his stories. I mean, you just get lost down in the snow. You don't even want to stay in a hotel.
Yeah,
you don't want to stay in a hotel. You don't want to get lost down in the woods when it's snowing, for damn sure. And you definitely want to stay away from those people who might live in that apartment next to you, keep odd hours, and you hear some howling in the night and stuff like that. So I mean, there's just so many things that he in real life that I probably wouldn't do, and that's what makes his horror so real and visceral, because he deals with things from a unique approach, and he's phenomenal. One of the best.
Yeah. You don't even want to have a bake-off, because, know, that shit could get ugly.
It could.
All right, well, congratulations again to Stephen Graham Jones for the Only Good Indians, the This Is Horror Novel of the Year. And now it is time to announce the Novella of the Year. And the winner is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. So let's jump into our conversation with Laurel. Laurel, welcome back to This Is Horror, and congratulations on winning Novella of the Year for Crossroads.
Thank you very much. That's very exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that we rather recently spoke with you on episodes 404 and 405, so if people want all the juicy details on Crossroads and that fun topic of grief, then that is the episode or the episodes for them. But, I mean, for those who haven't listened, tell us just a little bit about Crossroads.
Okay, yeah. So Crossroads is a novella. It's what is considered grief horror. It centers around the main character, Chris, whose adult son died almost 2 years before in a car accident. She goes and visits him every day at his roadside cross where he died. And one night she ends up cutting herself and bleeds on the ground, and it kind of it starts something, and he appears to her that night, and then she kind of goes down the rabbit hole from there.
Yeah, yes. And I wonder, I mean, since it is topical to the novella, what are some of the hardest challenges that you've had to face as a parent?
Oh gosh. It seems like a lot of them. Um, one that really sticks out is when well, and I put this in the novella actually. When my son was about 4 or 5 months old, he had like his fontanel, the little soft spot on top of his head was bulging. And I called the pediatrician about it. They got me in immediately. They ran a few tests. And then she came back in the room and she said, "Okay, I've called the university hospital. They're expecting you. They're setting out to do a spinal tap, on a 5-month old." So
Mm,
that was that was that's one of the hardest ones that I can remember because I had to actually be the adult and not, freak out. Um, and I kept thinking, I'm not going to look. I can't look. I can't watch that. And
mm,
then on the drive over, I just kind of, I talked to someone at work real quick and she told me, she's like, "You have to suck it up. You're the mom. You have to do this." And, you know, and you have to. You can't look away. You don't have that. You don't have that choice. So, yeah, that's one that definitely sticks out. They did not end up doing the spinal tap, thank God.
yeah, thank goodness.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I mean, it all worked out okay ultimately, as far as
Yeah.
life ever does.
Yeah, it was just a benign like skull condition. But I guess it can mean meningitis or,
Mm,
other horrible brain things. And having talked to other parents since then, apparently this is a common things that happen. The doctor freaks out, sends you to the emergency room, and then after you recover from your heart attack over that, they generally find something more benign, but you never know that in the moment.
no, no. And yeah, I do find that the younger the child, the more kind of cautious the doctors will be. But of course, also if as the parent, the younger your child and the more the doctors do kind of seem to be doing these extreme things, the more you're naturally going to want to freak out, even though you know that you shouldn't. You have to play the adult, but no one really teaches us that. We have to learn it in the moment.
Yep. Yeah. All of a sudden you realize you're the grown up, and there's no one who's going to step in and do it for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's terrifying, really, especially because I just feel like a child that happened to get older and doesn't look like a child anymore.
I relate to that quite a bit.
Right.
I'm always looking for an adultier adult,
Yeah.
It's like I'm turning 40 next year, but I need an adultier adult. I need someone who's really knows what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like, okay, is there anyone in the room who's actually an adult, not just someone, wearing the adult costume? Well, from parenting to novella writing, what do you think makes the novella such an ideal form for telling horror stories?
I think because, and I'm paraphrasing what Josh Mailerman said about it once, which is that the novella lets you hold a single note kind of all the way through. It lets you just kind of hook on to that with an intensity and ride it to the end. And it makes for something that people can, if they choose to, read in a single sitting or in a couple of sittings, and kind of keeps the pacing up and the reader's investment in it. They just in well, I mean, it happens to me reading novellas. I just get sucked in, and I just feel, I feel more connected, and I feel like I don't want to put it down.
Yeah.
That's a new way for me to even think about a novella, and I love that analogy.
I do
It's
too.
very
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. I am not a musician, but that kind of made sense to me that you could just kind of follow that all the way down.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that the novella has been having a renaissance. I mean, I'd say for the last, 5 or so years, it really does just seem to be getting, more popular with each passing year. And I mean, that's a great, great thing.
It is, yeah. And on a very practical note, they're much cheaper to ship. So if if you're shipping them all over the place, it's $2 to ship Crossroads, and it's usually like 5 or 6 to ship my novel. So from a purely financial standpoint, it's cheaper.
Yeah. Does this mean that you have a room in your house that's just loaded with books?
Well, almost every room in our house is loaded with books, but most of them are not written by me. I do have a couple of boxes that are in my
Yeah.
office.
Yeah. Yeah. I did mean your own books rather than
Well,
books in
yeah.
general. It's probably a given, with us all being writers.
Yeah, but I'm sitting in this office and I'm staring at a giant shelf of books, and there's another one and there's another, and I'm like, well, no, it really is full of books. But yeah,
Yeah.
not what you meant.
Okay, so you're sitting in the office, you're staring at the books. If you had, until I finished asking this question, to recommend one of those books, which would you choose?
Oh man. One that I have read fairly recently, oh gosh, and I'm going to forget the name, but it's a short story collection. It was put out by Perpetual Motion. There's that series. There,
Lost Films?
yeah, Lost Films, Lost Signal, and Lost,
Contact?
yeah, Lost Contact. Yeah, so it was Lost. I think it was Lost Signals that I read, and that had just some unbelievable stories in it. Just some really just punch you in the gut. And Paul Michael Anderson's story in that, I mean, it's been a little bit since I've read it, but it just, wow, it just completely stuck with me. So yeah, that's if you're looking for a short story collection, that's one I would highly recommend.
Yeah, I think Perpetual Motion Machine always put out fantastic anthologies, so I mean, and always a very eclectic mix of horror and authors too.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I don't know how he and Lori do that, just reading through all those submissions. I'm working on Slush for, I guess we're on second round for the anthology I'm working on now, and I just think of Max and I'm like, "My God, how do you guys do this multiple times a year?"
Yeah, well, maybe at the moment, he just takes solace in the fact that they're not pizza horror stories. I think he probably still has PTSD from that particular experience. But Max, that's what you fucking get for putting a call out for a pizza horror anthology. What were you thinking, you and David James Keaton? It's probably David James Keaton who came up with it. That guy is trouble.
I've said that from the very beginning.
Well, I wonder, in terms of writing novellas, what do you think can make and break a successful novella? So, what are some of the do's and don'ts?
Oh gosh. I feel like that's hard to say because I feel like for every rule there are exceptions, you know? So because I almost want to say, well, don't write it to write to market, you know. But on the other hand, some people do that and they do it beautifully, and very successfully. I guess in the way I think about it, in the way that I write, and the way that Crossroads came about was just very organic and very um, just uncomplicated. Um, it was just a story that was pretty well fleshed out by the time I thought of it, and so I would just say the main thing is to write what you want to read and to just follow the story, um, and don't be afraid to go back and rewrite if you need to, and don't be afraid, just don't be afraid to make it yours. I know that all sounds very generic, but as far as making it a success, I uh, I I think that compelling characters, that spending the time to get to know your characters and making them compelling, making them carry the story. I think that's a necessity. But everything else is just kind of taste and marketing.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you also have an audiobook version of Crossroads, so I
Yes.
wonder
Yeah.
how that came about and how you went with the narrator. Is it Linda Jones?
It is Linda Jones.
Yeah,
Yes, she's
yeah.
wonderful. Um, well, Joe Hempel of Fireside Horror, I think, had recently started that, and he approached me about getting either that or he approached Off Limits. I'm not sure, but about doing an audio. And yep, I agreed to it. I wanted to, I wanted to see that. And he got a number, I think over 75 audition tapes, I think. I say tapes, I'm sure they weren't actually tapes, but anyways. Um, and so he sent me several that he had narrowed it down to. And um, I loved Linda's. She just so nailed the tone of Chris in my head, and in their interactions with Trey. So yeah, she did a beautiful job. She's very versatile, and just has a really great voice.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, what is next for you?
The main thing at this point is going to be getting through this anthology prep. We got over 600 submissions. And just some really absolutely stellar, beautiful stuff. And so right now we're working on narrowing that down. And other than that, I've got several novellas that are kind of either started or outlined that I'm dying to get back to work on. Um, and I have a novel that is out being shopped right now. So in a perfect world, I'd love to see that in print soon, but we'll see. That's, the author has so little control over that.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like there are a lot of exciting Laurel Hightower shaped stories in the future.
I hope so. Yeah.
All right, well, congratulations once again on winning Novella of the Year for Crossroads.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. It means a great deal to me. I'm very excited.
Always good to hear from Laurel, and what an amazing grief horror novella Crossroads is, richly deserving of the Novella of the Year award. And now it is time to turn our attention to the short story collection of the year. And the winner is Children of the Fang and Other Genealogies by John Langan. Let's hear from John. John, welcome to This Is Horror.
Thank you. It is lovely to be here, and for such a lovely reason.
And yeah, congratulations on winning Short Story Collection of the Year for Children of the Fang. This is 2 years in a row that you've won Short Story Collection.
It is hard to believe and incredibly gratifying. Here, I wrote a little something. I should just read that. The news that the voters have chosen Children of the Fang and Other Genealogies for the 2020 This Is Horror Award in the collection category comes as a surprise and a delight. Of course, you don't write for awards, but there's no denying the shot in the arm they represent. As with so many people, I found this past year at times a struggle, and I'm grateful for the joy that this award brings with it. Thanks to all who cast their vote for my book. The other finalists in the category, Kay Chronister, Kathy Koja, Adam Neville, and Christopher Slatsky, represent an impressive range of talent and accomplishment. I'm honored to have had my book associated with theirs. If you haven't read any of them, I urge you to remedy that oversight with all due haste. Together, their books make a compelling case for the continued health and vitality of the horror field, as indeed does this ballad as a whole. There are a number of people I have to thank. Ross Lockhart of Warthog Press for publishing the collection, and Matthew Jaffe for gifting it with such a striking cover. The editors who originally solicited its stories, and there are a few of them: Ellen Datlow, Aaron French, Nick Gevers, Oren Gray and Sylvia Moreno-Garcia, Eric Guignard, St. Joshi, Chris Kelso, Ross Lockhart, the late and sadly missed Joe Pulver, Daryl Schweitzer, Justin Steele, Simon Stranzis, and Erin Underwood. I have to thank my agent, the indefatigable Ginger Clark, and her associate, the fearless Nicole Eisenbrown. I have to thank those fellow writers who are always there when I pick up the phone, Laird Barron and Paul Tremblay. And I have to thank my family, of course, especially my younger son, David, with whom I've discussed storytelling and music as we've walked the dogs at night, and my wife, Fiona, who continues to accompany me through this strange, loving life we've made together. I included the words "and other genealogies" in my title to highlight my sense of these stories as mapping branches of my literary family tree, though only a partial accounting, its contents nonetheless gesture in the direction of the gnarled and twisted tree from which my stories have sprung. I'm grateful to be part of it, grateful for those who came before me, for those of my own generation, and for the newer writers who were doing such wonderful things. Thanks very much.
Oh, wow.
That was awesome. And this is such a awesome event.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about Children of the Fang because this is quite possibly the most diverse of your collections in terms of the theme and the range. So talk us through your intentions with Children of the Fang.
Sure. To make it, I'll try to be short because I know there are a lot of people to come on yet. My previous collection, Saphira and Other Betrayals, had been intensely focused on the theme of betrayal. And I had actually thought about including a few of the stories that wound up in Children of the Fang with Saphira, but they didn't fit. They weren't about betrayal. So I said, okay, I was obviously working through something. That collection has to be this tightly focused group of stories. So then I had this big sort of sprawling group of stories, and to a certain extent, I had in mind collections like Skeleton Crew, King's big fat collection with The Mist and Here There Be Tigers, and what's the Grandma and the Monkey. I loved those kinds of books when I was a kid, and so I liked the thought of doing something like that, just doing this kind of diverse group of, sort of grab bag of stories. You could find a little bit of everything in it. I got a little bit anxious when I thought about that because I thought, my other books had all had stronger kind of through lines thematically. And I thought, no, what's the theme? But I kind of realized that many of the stories had been written for tribute anthologies for different writers, some alive like Laird Barron, some long dead like Robert Chambers, and a number for Lovecraft anthologies, and even stories that weren't written explicitly for tribute anthologies. I had written with certain writers in mind, Jeffrey Ford or Peter Straub, and so I thought, oh, okay, well maybe that. And I was already hovering around Children of the Fang as a good title for the collection. So I thought, oh, Children of the Fang. Well, okay, this is genealogies then. Let's. And as I say in the story notes, it's incomplete. It's very white. It's very male. And so it doesn't gesture in the direction of writers who've been important to me, like Flannery O'Connor or Salman Rushdie. So that's something I'm trying to work on moving ahead, to be a little bit more cognizant and to engage and to engage with those influences. But for the moment, it was kind of fun in a way to just have this kind of insane collection, like I said, this kind of literary grab bag where there's post-apocalyptic stuff, there's stuff set, sort of Robert E. Howard pastiche set in Roman Britain, and all kinds of things in between. So it was, it felt like trying something new in a way, in terms of putting a collection together. And I guess the voters agreed that it succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder then, does this mean we might see a collection in the future with some Salman Rushdie influence.
I would love to think so. Yeah, I really would. I think that things take a while to work their way through my consciousness, and influence, sort of genealogy. You could also look at that as influence. It's something I've been fascinated with my entire scholarly life. Since I was in college as an undergraduate, and it's something I'm still fascinated by. And so there were writers. One of the fascinating things actually about writing the story notes for Children of the Fang was looking at the stories and seeing how certain writers, like King and Straub, say, were just inescapable for me. They just pop up. They sort of, they're like waves that just kind of keep, sort of rolling in over me. But there were other writers, Rushdie's one, for example, who, comparatively speaking, I read him when I was an undergraduate, but more so in the years after. So someone like Rushdie, say, is a writer I'm becoming more aware of my mind sort of working through him. Same thing with Shirley Jackson, I suppose. I'm becoming more aware of my mind kind of working through them a bit in the ways that I'm approaching stories now. Joan Aiken, another one. So yeah, there could very well be another such collection at some point, years in the future, which will engage some of those other influences too.
Okay, well, we are excited and looking forward to those. And I wonder, if someone could only read 2 of your short stories in Children of the Fang, which 2 would you choose?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. That's diabolical.
Yeah, I don't know why someone's been put in this weird situation, but just go with it.
Why do I have to do this? You just have to do it.
Yeah.
I would, I don't know. I would probably steer them towards the title story, Children of the Fang, which is a kind of a generational story, some of which is set in Kentucky, some of which is set in the Empty Quarter in the Arabian Desert, and some of it is set in upstate New York, and involves dysfunctional. Well, yeah, let's say dysfunctional family. Although what story isn't about a dysfunctional family, right? So I would tell them to look at that, and I would probably tell them. I'm quickly looking over the table of contents. I would probably tell them to look at a story called Episode 3 on the Great Plains in the Snow, which is about a pair of ghosts who are trying to deal with the ghost of a Tyrannosaurus Rex that is terrorizing a nearby town.
Well, who could not be in love with that idea?
Well,
My goodness. And I wonder, what is something that you have learned or read in the last year that has either helped you improve as a writer or a human being? Just a nice light question to wrap things up.
Geez, what has helped me? I've read a lot of terrific things this past year, and I think I went back and I reread a later novel by V.S. Naipaul called The Enigma of Arrival, which I had read 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And I thought, oh, all right, but I always felt like, it was one of those books. I felt like there's more to this than I'm getting. And so I sat down and I reread it, and I was just blown away by it. It was one of those books where I became so immersed in it that I kind of forgot where I was. I just sort of like fell into the scenes that were being described. And it's a very strange book because it's in a way all about Naipaul's misapprehensions, the way that it deals to a certain extent with him coming to England as a young man, a fictionalized version of him, and it's all about the things that he didn't understand, and it's about him realizing how situation after situation he didn't understand what was going on, and that I find that really fascinating, and I feel that kind of percolating in my brain somewhere. I think that's a really interesting way to approach a story, of what length, of novel length in Paul's case, I suppose, but of any length, a story about someone realizing what the limits of their knowledge. So you're kind of constantly running up against the limits of their knowledge. So yeah, I think that. And maybe that's, I mean, I think about that like I'm answering your question in a sort of literary sense, but maybe that's not a bad thing to learn as a person. Maybe realizing the limitations of what you know and how you know is not such a bad thing at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think so, definitely, and applicable to many areas of life.
Very true.
Well, could you leave our listeners with a short story tip? And that's in terms of writing short stories.
A short story tip. Something I would keep in mind, a lot of short story, when you see calls for anthologies, let's say, a lot of the deadlines are very quick. They say, oh, you've got like a month till the deadline, and I can never get that done in time. I'm not that fast a writer. But rather than being frustrated by that, I think to myself, well, you know what? That's fine. That's an idea. That's an idea for, like, if whatever it's the Salman Rushdie tribute anthology, and there's just no way I can make that deadline, or even worse, I haven't been invited to it. The fact that I respond to that and I think, oh, I wish I could have done that, that can still lead to a story. That can still produce a story. So when you see, you see that there's a new anthology out, and you think, man, I wish I'd been invited to that, or you think I wish I could make that deadline or whatever. That's fine. Just keep the idea in your head. Just hang on to that. Hang on to the fact that the Wizard of Oz anthology really struck a chord in you, and then that can be something you return to in your writing. So don't rather than thinking, oh my God, I've missed out on this, in a way treat it as, hey, I learned something. I learned that this is something I'd really like to write a story about, and then go write that story.
All right, well, fantastic advice, and thank you for your time, and congratulations again on winning Short Story Collection of the Year for Children of the Fang.
Thank you so much.
Always good to hear from John, and we gotta get him back on the show sometime for another full conversation. Such a fascinating human being.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's always a good time on the show. He always has some story that he needs to relate to us. That's usually humorous and heart-wrenching at the same time. So yes, we definitely need him having back on the show.
Okay, well now it is time for the Anthology of the Year. And the winner is Miscreations, Gods, Monstrosities, and Other Horrors, edited by Doug Morano and Michael Bailey. So let's jump into our conversation with Doug and Michael. Doug and Michael, welcome back to This Is Horror.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here.
And what an occasion, because Miscreations has won Anthology of the Year. Congratulations.
Stoked.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Very excited.
Now, we actually last spoke with you on episode 325, and we had a huge conversation about Miscreations pre-release, but I mean, now we're talking post-release and award-winning, so Tell us about some of the responses and reactions to Miscreations.
Do you want to go first, Michael?
Yeah, I just want to jump in really quick and say how awesome it is that we don't have to record an acceptance speech that doesn't get to be used. Because with the Bram Stoker and the Jacksons, it's a really weird feeling to have to record an acceptance speech, like not knowing if you want it. It's like you're pretending. So this is really cool, and it's like a big honor to not have to do that, to do this live.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's like simultaneously winning and then also not winning. So it's this weird sort of twilight in between place.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this limbo that exists out there with like hundreds of acceptance speeches of books that didn't win, and it'd be really interesting to hear some of those.
It's like the Marvel multiverse, right?
Yeah, the what if.
Yeah, that would be so interesting for some of those to be released, because I'm sure as well that a number of them would say like, "Oh, I never expected to win," and it's like, well, you didn't either.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
If you posted them, people would be sending you congratulations.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of funny.
Yeah. Wow.
But, in all seriousness, I've just been blown away by the response to Miscreations from really the moment that Michael and I started to promote it ahead of the release, and then as it released, pre-released through Nightworms, and then onward, from the feedback that we've gotten from readers to the sales numbers, to the awards nominations. Everything has really lined up in such an exciting and wonderful way for this book, which is pretty gratifying, considering the fact that it was a really hard book to get together. And regardless of the road from concept to publication, you never really know where you're at until you start to get that feedback. You can believe in your book, but you never really know until it gets out in front of readers. And I'm just so thrilled that we've received the response that we have, up to and including this award, which is wonderful.
Like, this anthology just keeps giving. We're still finding new readers every month. It's kind of cool to see the numbers come in, and it's just like been this constant build for well over a year now, and it's just great seeing the response and the reviews. I mean, we're over like 100 reviews on most places, and it's incredible to see that, all that positivity.
Right. It always feels like kind of a crazy endeavor starting one of these out, just because you try to do something that's intensely meaningful to yourself, and that kind of keeps you going throughout the process. And then you just hope that translates when you release these stories out into the wild. It just feels like we may have caught lightning in a bottle. I was so pleased also to see Josh Mallerman take home his first Bram Stoker Award for his story, One Last Transformation, in the anthology. That was kind of a huge moment for all of us who were involved in the book.
Yeah.
And I'm just so proud of Josh and what he did with that story.
Yeah, I wonder, are there any plans, or have you had any talks about potentially translating some of these stories to the screen? Because I could imagine a Miscreations television show or a kind of filmic anthology would just be fantastic.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was just saying it would be nice. It's tough with like the rights, and because we don't have like the movie rights and stuff to it. But it's cool seeing so many anthology series come out on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. So there's a lot of potential for it down the line. All these little anthology series with short stories, like Love, Death, and Robots and Black Mirror. I mean, there's just so much potential for it.
I think it's a ripe concept for exactly that type of anthology series, and I would love to see it. But Michael is right. It's rights negotiations with each author, and making sure that they're treated well and that they get the deal that they deserve out of it. And I just philosophically, I'd love to see it because these are worthy stories, and I think it would help them get out in front of a larger audience. Will it happen? I don't know.
All right. Well, I wonder what are some of the do's and don'ts when putting together an anthology? And I know that we must have touched on this in episode 325, but for those who are looking to put their own anthology together, what kind of advice could you give?
I would say keep the open call small because we had a really small open call for this one. We needed to fill just a handful of spots, and we received over 700 submissions for that just in a really short period of time, and that adds a lot of time to the project. And like with my latest anthology, I did open call for about half the spots, and I just have so much time dedicated to reading these stories, like nearing 1,000, and it's just insane how much time that takes, just all those millions of words. So I would just say, my advice is to, keep the open call short or as small as possible.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and then I would add to that. I would echo that. First of all, I totally second that. But I would also say, if you're an anthologist, sort of looking to populate a table of contents, there's sort of like concentric circles of fandom within horror, and there's all these little niches. And what I would recommend is trying to find a theme or a concept where those circles overlap or where they could overlap, and then try to populate your table of contents with authors who also sort of build on one another's audiences. Meanwhile, always making sure that your quality is there. But if you want people to encounter the book and engage with the stories, make sure that you think about your audience, and find those places that overlap. And you're going to get more mileage out of your anthology from a readership, from a financial, from a marketing perspective, if you find those areas that overlap. And the more fandoms and the more interests that you can overlap, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, that's great practical advice, and I do urge people wanting more to really listen to the full episode that we did with you, because you were so generous with both your time and knowledge, and you really did go deep into the financials and were very kind of candid and honest in a way that sometimes we can be reluctant to do so in publishing. But yeah, there's so much.
Right. And I would say, just to add on to that, I don't want to come off as completely cynical. I think it's not a choice of commerce or art, but you can do art in a way that encourages commerce. And we're only able to keep doing these for as long as it remains financially practical. The indie world is littered with the corpses of folks that didn't figure that out for one reason or another. And sometimes, no matter what you do, it doesn't work. So just make sure that you at least have that in mind as you begin. It doesn't have to be the thing that you're after, but keep it in the mix.
Yeah. Well, I mean, winning this award amongst others, I think, is proof that, you can have commerce and art.
What's really cool about this award is that it's really driven by the readers, and the people that we're trying to reach with these stories. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so hugely honored by this. Is it's people who presumably bought the book, engaged with the stories, enjoyed the stories, and then took time out of their day to nominate and go through the process to vote. I mean, those are things that not everybody is going to take time out of their day to do. And the fact that people did that to the degree that, it put us over the finish line is just, it kind of gets me a little choked up, to be honest with you. It makes me feel like the time and effort and angst that we put into this book was worth it.
Yeah, and especially seeing all the other nominees on there. I mean, we're in really good company. So to be listed alongside those names is a great honor too. And they should all be proud of their books because they're all excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, for writers submitting to anthologies, what do you think are some of the best ways to make their stories stand out?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
it's like I'm writing a nonfiction book about like what that takes, and it really like you have to snag the reader on that very first sentence, on the very first paragraph, the first page, and just keep that momentum going. It has to be a story that's remembered long after you set it down. I mean, every story in this table of contents, I just see the title and I'm pulled back into that story. So like it just needs to be something that's memorable. Like you can tell when a writer puts all their heart into their project. It really shows on the page. That voice comes out. It's amazing.
I'm going to be a little difficult because that's what I do. But I would actually go the opposite way, and Michael knows this, and I think I might have mentioned it during our last conversation on This Is Horror, but I often read the last line first. And I don't know why I started doing that, but I get a sense of the reader's command of a good ending, which this is probably a weird quirk for me, but it's more important to me than a good beginning. And I think if it makes me want to see how the writer got there, already knowing how it ends, then I know that it's not going to be a story that I'm going to get tired of. Because as Bailey knows, like you read these stories dozens of times between the first part and the publication. And so if it's compelling enough for me to want to know how they got there, even if I've already had the spoiler at the end, then I feel like the author is kind of cooking.
Mm.
Yeah, and to go along with that, the practice I do all the time is I'll just flip to a random page and just start reading and see if it pulls me in there, because that's a big part of it too. It's like, yeah, you can have that opening hook, you can have a good closing, but somewhere in the middle, page 12 or 17, does it still hold you? Does that have enough pull for the rest of the story? So sometimes I'll do that just to check out the quality of the writing, and then I'll go back through and read it from beginning to end. And yeah, sometimes, like usually if my mind starts to wander or I feel like I'm tired of reading, that's usually a sign that the story just isn't going to cut it, because it has to hold that attention, even if I'm distracted as a reader, because most readers are going to be distracted. So I'll sometimes, flip to the end as well, just to see, like, is this going to have like a tongue-in-cheek kind of ending? Is it going to blow me away, or is it going to be something that I kind of was expecting since page one?
Mm.
It's like a way to gauge momentum and see that forward trajectory of it.
All right. Well, I wonder what is next for you both, as collaborators and as individuals.
Doug, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'll step in. Well, I have started my own outfit called Bad Hand Books, and we're sort of a theoretical entity right now, because there are no books yet. But I'm in the middle of putting together an anthology called The Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors, which is stories about things that are hidden, obscured, unspoken, or otherwise concealed. I'm super excited about the table of contents that is coming together. I've got 3 signed right now, and then a number of authors that are committed to the project. I'm looking to have that out in the spring of 2022, which feels like it's forever, I'm sure, but for me, it feels like it's almost tomorrow. And so you get a weird sense of time when you start to do these for a while. And I'm also working with a few other authors that I can't say much about, but looking at a collection of novellas right now, a nonfiction book, and then some interesting spins on classic horror novels that I'm just starting to kind of put the feelers out to do in a really interesting way. But that's about all I can say on that. So it's a lot of stuff right now that's in process that I can't talk about, but 2022 is hopefully going to be a huge year for Bad Hand.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I love the logo you've created and the products. I want one of those shirts eventually. I'll have to figure out how to get it here to Costa Rica, but all the locals here would probably kind of look at me a little strange trying to figure out what it is, but it'd be kind of cool to have. But yeah, as far as future projects, I'd love to, work with Doug again sometime on a book. I mean, we both know what we're doing and it's fun, and we kind of mesh together really well. So eventually that'll happen sometime down the road. And personal projects, I have probably the last Chiral Mad anthology coming out really early next year. It was supposed to be late this year, but I'm working with a few authors to tidy things up. It's all but completed except for 2 short stories that I'm working on. One of them's turned into a novelette, so spending a little bit more time on that. But it's going to be amazing, and I'm looking forward to it. And then personally, I'm wrapping up a nonfiction book called Writing, all about kind of correcting the way we make books. So I have that possibly coming out next year, and then constantly trying to sell. I think I have 4 novels out there and a nonfiction book that's kind of floating around with publishers, and then some possible short film work down the line. Writing some screenplays, turning poems into short films possibly. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. That's
awesome. Michael Bailey, there's one thing I want to say before I forget, and it kind of brings us full circle to the things that I didn't get to say in public for the Stoker and for the Shirley Jackson Award. But I just think we need to make time to say, without Michael Bailey, there is no Miscreations. And he kind of scraped me off the pavement at a pretty low point in the book's progress. I'd been trying to get this thing made for a long time and was at the point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And I don't think I could have done it alone. Michael stepped in and got us back on track and allowed us to publish it under the Written Backwards banner, and just provided so much insight and support and talent and encouragement that you bet, man. Anytime you want to work together again, I'm game.
Yeah, I mean, we make a killer team. I know people get excited when they see us working together, and I think we've only met like face to face maybe once. But online we're like best buddies and working on stuff like this. So yeah, we definitely have some work to do down the line. I'd love to keep that going. I mean, that's how like what happened with Miscreations is exactly what happened with the Library of the Dead. It was the same thing. It was at a couple publishers, got scraped off the ground, kind of put it in my hands and lifted it up and made something out of it. So I guess I'm good at seeing potential, and this book Miscreations, man, it was just incredible from concept. So yeah, so it wouldn't be done without you as well. So I got to throw that out there.
I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Okay, well, huge congratulations again on a richly deserved award. So Miscreations is Anthology of the Year.
That's awesome to hear.
Thank you so much. I'm totally thrilled. I can't believe it. It's so awesome.
Great to hear from Doug and Michael, and a lot of exciting things happening in the future. I'm particularly intrigued to see what happens with Bad Hand Books.
Oh yeah, that's, as soon as he said that, I remember seeing it on Twitter, and it was like an instant follow. I was like, okay, I gotta find out what he's gonna be doing with this, because it sounds really, really good.
Yeah, you got t-shirts already. I don't know of many publishers that get the t-shirt out before the books, but Doug's done it. Well, next up is the Fiction Magazine of the Year. And the winner is Nightmare Magazine. So let's hear from the founder, John Joseph Adams, and the editor, Wendy Wagner. John and Wendy, welcome to This Is Horror.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
And congratulations to Nightmare Magazine for winning Fiction Magazine of the Year.
Oh, it is so exciting, don't you think, John?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's always wonderful to have any kind of thing like this where you're being hailed as the greatest thing in a particular category. And it's always a huge honor. And for me, it's like I feel like it feels like an extra special thing since with as starting with Nightmare 100, which was the January issue this year. That was my last issue as editor. So like 2020 was kind of my my big finale. So it's nice to go out on the high note. And of course Wendy's the editor now.
Yeah, and I mean, let's go back all the way to the beginning. I want to know a little bit about the origin story. So I know that Nightmare began in October 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was at the time I was editing and publishing Lightspeed already, and I got the idea to do a horror magazine, and I had partnered with the folks at Creeping Hemlock Press, who I had met at an event, and we had stayed talking afterward, and they were already doing their press, and so I thought like could have a partnership with them because I didn't really want to publish two different magazines. I thought it would be like I was still new to the publishing side of things at that time, so so they partnered with me to launch it, and they were around for maybe like a year and a half or something like that. And at that point, I took over as publisher for various reasons, but it's it's been running like clockwork ever since, basically. Of course, one of the huge reasons that it's been running like clockwork is once I brought Wendy on to be an associate editor at first, and then managing editor and all that. And how long have you been with us now, Wendy? It's been a long time, right?
Yeah, since 2014.
Oh wow, yeah, geez. It's hard to imagine that the magazine's even been around that long, let alone that there was Nightmare before you.
It's funny because you had actually asked me when the magazine started if I wanted to come on as an AE, and at the time I was doing a lot of tie-in writing, so I had to say no. But it was so hard to say no. So it was really nice to be able to come on, just a couple years later.
We're talking about all the time that Nightmare's been going. I mean, of course, this means that next year it will be the 10th anniversary. It will be a decade of Nightmare. So, I mean, have you been thinking about what you might do to mark the occasion?
Yeah. It just hit me like last week that was coming up. So I haven't put my thinking cap on really. I just sort of was reeling around. I'll have to talk to John and think if he wants to do anything fun.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it. Yeah, because I ran into the same thing with Lightspeed when the 10th anniversary of Lightspeed came up, and it was sort of like the same sort of slightly awkward timing of like issue 100 precedes the 10th anniversary by not a huge amount, and so so I was like, oh well, I just did a big special issue 100, and then but then it's like, oh, but now the 10th anniversary is up, so we should do something special for that too. And for Lightspeed, I just didn't get it together to do anything special for 10th anniversary since we did the big 100th issue. But this would be like Wendy's. This could be Wendy's like big issue since I edited issue 100. So yeah, let's we'll have to talk about that for sure.
Definitely. We'll have some fun. If nothing else, we can contemplate our mortality, as one always does on big birthdays.
Right.
Yeah, that's always a fun little exercise to do, and I think something particularly popular, within the horror genre.
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, talking about the change from issue 100 and Wendy taking the editorial reins. I mean, what are you enjoying most about the new editorial capacity?
Oh gosh. Uh, Everything just seems more fun now that I'm in charge. You know, I love working with people in the horror community, and it's just a great and exciting place to be. And I'm just excited to be making connections with some new writers, and trying to make sure that we're publishing a big wide gamut of horror, maybe bringing in even a bit more like bizarro stuff than we've done before. And I just think we're having a great time. And this year we added some new stuff. We used to just do like short fiction. We do 2 full-length original short stories, and then we do 2 full-length reprint short stories. And so now we've shaken it up, and we still do our 2 original short stories, but then now we're doing little snippets that we call the horror lab. So we've got flash fiction and poetry and even some creative nonfiction. And it's just, I think people are getting really excited to try new things. And yeah, that's been really fun to see people just kind of try to experiment and maybe push the bubble a little bit.
Yeah, I noticed that creative nonfiction is now part of the Nightmare remit. So, I mean, on that note, I wondered for people considering submitting creative nonfiction, what distinguishes or what separates a piece of nonfiction from a piece of creative nonfiction?
Well, I think when we think about nonfiction, particularly from like a magazine point of view, you're thinking of things like interviews or like research projects, things like that. Whereas creative nonfiction is really more about telling really personal, true stories in experimental ways. So we have we had a small piece come out, I think just this month, and it was neat because it was just the writer, like, she wrote this piece about like if she was laying on like the table in the morgue, what would a forensic scientist like learn from her body. So it was cool and morbid and fun, and it's not fiction because it's not made up, but it's not like, here is how forensic science works. So we are still trying to do things that are like fun and entertaining and spooky and dark, but including writers who maybe are not like delving into those subjects from the point of view of fiction.
Yeah, and I can certainly see how that wouldn't be placed in the New Scientist or the Guardian. And I love that idea of, nonfiction that's almost pontificating on death or these morbid ideas. So I want to see more of that.
Me too. Every now and again, I write things like that, and I was like, we need more places to send our creepy and horrible nonfiction.
Yeah, because I imagine as well thoughts like that. I mean, a lot of horror writers and a lot of people kind of dabbling in dark fiction, probably we have these thoughts just kind of part of our everyday, but now there's a market. Now we can actually write it down and send it to you.
Yay! That's what I hope more people do.
Yeah, and I mean, talking of which, in a few weeks, on September the 12th, I believe that you are open again for submissions. So for the whole gamut of nightmare writing, non-fiction and fiction, poetry. So, I mean, what kind of things are you looking for? And do you have any tips for those who are looking to submit?
Well, I mean, we're always looking for every kind of thing. We're not one of those magazines that will ever say, oh, we don't want to see blah, 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 because we love to see everything. And so, send us your zombies and your vampires and things like that. We're a great home for that. But we're also a great home for monstrous visions that, don't have names yet. So yeah, send us all kinds of good stuff. And I'd say, if you're looking for a tip, I guess I've got two. One is that I can never get too many shorter pieces. Like if you're writing short stories, I have a small budget. So a story that's less than 5,000 words is a little cheaper to buy than a story that's like 7,000 words. So that might up your odds a tiny bit. That said, if you have a really dreamy 7,000 word story, I don't want to miss out on that either. But then I guess just try to write something as real and honest and full of voice as you can. And it's probably that's the kind of thing that really seems to grip us when we are reading in the slush minds.
Yeah, and I think we haven't heard for a while an editor inviting people to send more zombie stories, but actually that's quite apropos in a sense, because I believe, John, that's where it all kind of started for you.
Yeah, I mean, at least in terms of sort of category horror, I had done Wastelands. My anthology Wastelands was the first one I did, but then later the same year is when The Living Dead came out. So, and yeah, in a larger sense, that's how that's what cemented my career, basically having those two anthologies come out right out of the gates. And The Living Dead was just like a huge success. So, yeah, I mean. I think by definition, it would be pretty silly for Nightmare in particular to ever say, "Don't send us zombie stories." At least when I was editor. If Wendy wanted to, she could have. But
you know how I feel about zombies, John. Like I'm always like The Living Dead and The Living Dead 2 are like two of my very favorite anthologies, and I'm always telling him this.
Well, I wonder, John, what are you missing most about, stepping down from that editorial capacity, and what perhaps are you enjoying most?
Enjoying most, I guess, it would be mostly just, it's one less thing for me to have to worry about. And I can focus more on Lightspeed stuff, which has been interesting for me because, with Wendy starting to take flash fiction, and then also we had revived Fantasy Magazine recently as well, and they started taking flash fiction. I started to see, both Fantasy and Nightmare doing it, and I'm like, maybe I should give it a try. I'd never really accepted flash fiction, at least not, not openly. Like there was a couple at Lightspeed. I mean, there were a couple stories that were technically Flash that we published, but we never like opened to Flash specifically. And so I just I started doing a little experiment to incorporate it into Lightspeed more, which it was, I think we've published them first in July or August, is somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
I think July was the first issue.
Right, and so we started publishing that Flash in Lightspeed as well, and yeah, I've been enjoying that a lot actually, and so I guess that's the answer to the question, but yeah, I mean I do miss it at times, and I mean I think there's a good chance that there will probably be things that end up in Lightspeed that are on the darker end that many folks would consider horror, which judging by the Fiction Magazine of the Year category this year, a lot of people also thought even last year I published plenty of horror in Lightspeed. Wendy and I, though, also we have very similar taste in horror, and so like, well, I mean, in general, I think, but like, so if I get something that I think is on the darker side, like lots of times I'll send it over to Wendy, and like she'll send me things that she thinks aren't dark enough. And sometimes we end up buying something for one magazine that was submitted to the other one, and vice versa. So I expect more of that in the future.
Yeah, I think we will, because I mean we have so much fun working together.
And on the website, in kind of the mission statement, you say, when you read Nightmare, it is our hope that you'll see where horror comes from, where it is now, and where it's going. So on that note, where do you think horror is going?
Whew. Damn, that's a tough question, right? I think the most important thing that horror has been doing over the last few years, and it's just, I think it's gonna keep snowballing along, is being more inclusive of just a much wider group of writers. You know, I think we're seeing a lot of people who are, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people who come from different kinds of gender backgrounds. They're starting to feel like, hey, we deserve a chance to share our stories and to scare people's socks off too. And I think that we're starting to see just like it's bringing out new kinds of monsters, it's bringing out new structures of stories. It's it's just giving us whole new ways to be afraid. And so I think that is a steadily growing trend, and we're going to just keep seeing more and more of it, and I think that is fantastic.
I've been seeing that as well with the different types of stories and different types of writers, and I think that's something that's been going on probably for like really the last decade, and it's really starting to build some momentum, and I think it's just a really, really cool thing. As far as like any particular types of tropes, have you get, to me, short stories kind of like gauge where horror is going to go, what the trend is going to be. What have you been seeing trending lately as far as tropes go?
Well, I think, we've only opened to submissions 2 times since I've stepped up. And I think there was I was expecting a lot more witchy sort of stories to come through, but really we didn't see that many. The fact that this year there was a magazine called Mermaids Monthly really spiked a lot of mermaid and deep sea horror that was coming through. So that really sort of overwhelmed, like it was too big of a plot point to help to see anything else. So I'm pretty excited to see what we'll start getting now that has moved beyond us, because I think that's where I'll actually start being able to get like an idea of what the new tropes are. It can't just all be evil mermaids.
Next year we're launching Evil Mermaids Monthly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess this sometimes happens within horror if there's a call out for an oddly specific anthology, and then, any of the stories that didn't make it are then submitted to all the other publications. So I think it was last year that Max Booth and David James Keaton put out a pizza horror anthology. So, then there were actually submission guides with various magazines that would have to say no pizza horror stories.
Right. Yeah, and that's not exclusive to horror either. Like that happens in science fiction, fantasy as well, and maybe in other genres too. But certainly I've seen that where it's like, what the heck's going on? Like, why are we getting all these very specific stories set in this one area? And it's like, oh yeah, somebody's doing an anthology, of course. I mean, the funny thing is that maybe you don't think about when you think about these things is that it also is not great for the editor sometimes, because it's like, so say you're doing your pizza horror anthology and you get 500 or 1,000 submissions or whatever it is, like if you're doing open call, if you're going to only take 20 of those stories, then you have 980 rejections that are then going to be circulated amongst all of the horror publications that are out there. And some of them will probably get published because you're not the arbiter of all that is good about pizza horror. So somebody will probably publish their stories elsewhere, and then it's like, and if enough good ones get published elsewhere, they might get published before your anthology, and then it's like by the time your anthology comes out, it's like, oh well, yeah, but I read that pizza horror story in the dark or whatever, and so it's like it seems like less novel all of a sudden.
Yeah, so think about that, Max Booth.
I still crack up about all the people who, the eventual or inevitable people who got rejected trying to form their own anthology.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
They'd have to call it something like Leftovers.
Leftover
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah.
The horror.
I feel like we could start like a feud right now. It's like, have the title of this episode like John Joseph Adams decrees Max Booth, you're not the ultimate arbiter of pizza horror, exclamation point, so
Yeah.
You can start a feud, don't you?
I can just lift that as a soundbite and
yeah.
tag Max in that and see what happens. He'll definitely be up for a fight. So if you want that feud, I think Max will be game.
As long as it ends in an eating match.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that I might be up for.
Yeah.
As long as we're not talking about Chicago style pizza, because come on, talk about pizza horror. That's not pizza.
Ooh, shots are being fired here in the latter stages of this. Well, I'm interested in the decision that you made to put out nightmare stories and articles for free via the website and podcast, as well as in the ebook form. Because I guess, too, at the time that you were doing that, that was a pretty revolutionary move.
Yeah, there was a few places that were doing things like that. Like Strange Horizons had been around for a long time. Clark's World had been doing it. They started it shortly before Lightspeed, and then of course Lightspeed was a little bit before Nightmare. But yeah, it just seemed like the thing with short fiction is that the greatest enemy of short fiction is people just not even knowing it's there. And so we thought if we could, remove the barrier to entry, i.e., cost, and make it so that people can share links, like on social media and things like that, and make it so that if you read a good story, you could just share a link to somebody, and then they could just go read it without having to expect them to like pony up some cash for it. Obviously, that's like the ideal situation, like if it works, which isn't a guarantee. But in our case, we managed to make it work where we have, we sell our ebooks and we sell subscriptions, and we're able to, make the magazine not hemorrhage cash by doing those things, and coupled with like advertising and things like that. It certainly helps when you. When you already had a successful magazine before that, which I did with Lightspeed. So I'd already learned the ropes doing that, and then, had to make the transition to trying to do the same thing in the horror community. But Nightmare's been growing over the course of its life, and it's in a pretty good place.
All right. Well, I wonder what is next for Nightmare and for you both individually.
Well, I think for Nightmare, we're just going to keep, I've only been putting out issues myself since February. So still have, a lot to learn and a lot of things to explore. So I'll just keep kind of trucking along on there. And of course, soon I'll be overwhelmed with submissions and can't even remember my own name. And of course, now we'll have to do something special for the 10th anniversary issue.
Yeah. Apologies for basically calling you out on that. What the fuck have I done?
Yeah.
It's like started a feud with you and Max Booth, put pressure on you to celebrate the 10th anniversary.
This has been a very dangerous call.
I know, you wouldn't have agreed if you'd have known I was going to come up with all this shit.
No, it's useful to have that kind of stuff pointed out like as soon as possible, so like we don't come up like where it's like a month in advance. We're like, oh man, we didn't think about that, So I appreciate it at least. But And then, I mean, as for me, like, what's next? I mean, I'm still editing. I'm still series editor of Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, which also publishes horror. But I guess HMH felt like the name was too long if we put horror in there too. But so I'm working on that still every year. I'm still editing Lightspeed. I'm still working on some anthologies and stuff. I do have a big I do actually have a big horror project that is in the works that I am under. I cannot mention under penalty of like death, basically. But hopefully I'll get to talk about that soon. That would be. I think everyone's gonna be real excited about that one once I can talk about it. But so I'm not done with horror entirely. So I'll leave you with that little teaser.
Ooh, I can't wait, John. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. And I mean, if you did mention it and then you're killed, that would also help with the ratings. So it really is up to you.
Right. Good point. I mean, I don't know if I'm that concerned about your ratings.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you really have the allegiance to This Is Horror.
I mean, I'm willing to go out on a limb for you guys, but that's a little far.
Yeah. I mean, you don't ask, you don't know. And Wendy, what about your fiction?
Oh gosh, well, I just had a new horror novel come out last week, so I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah, so that was exciting. And then actually I have a gothic novella coming out in October that I'm very excited about. It's called The Secret Skin. And that should be super fun. And yeah, I guess I should really start getting to work on writing another book.
Yeah, I guess that is the nature of it, once you've put one out, you have to put another out. The machine keeps on going.
It's true. You can never just sit around.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again to you both, to Nightmare for winning Fiction Magazine of the Year, and thank you for spending some of your evening chatting with us.
It was awesome. It was so great. And like I said before, we are just delighted. This is so fun.
Yeah, thanks again, and it's a real honor, and thanks for having us on to chat about it.
Well, that was an awful lot of fun speaking with John and Wendy, and I'm looking forward to getting John back on the show for another solo conversation. I think after 6 years, it's reasonable to have him return, and it will be great to talk with Wendy, particularly about the novel that she just put out and the novella that is forthcoming this Halloween.
No, definitely.
Well, now it is time to announce the Publisher of the Year. And the winner of Publisher of the Year is Undertow Publications. Okay, and now for a message from Michael Kelly, the publisher and editor-in-chief of Undertow Publications.
Wow. We're absolutely thrilled to be named Publisher of the Year in the This Is Horror Awards. A bit stunned as well. Truly a great and humbling honor. Thank you to Michael David Wilson, Bob Pastorella, and the This Is Horror team and all the readers. Thanks to everyone who voted for us. This is especially gratifying considering the strength of this category. Congratulations to all my fellow nominees. Publishing is a truly collaborative endeavor with a bunch of moving parts. So thank you to the readers, the writers, the librarians, the designers, the artists, the editors, the proofreaders, the booksellers, and the reviewers who help keep the wheel turning. Thank you.
Well, good to hear from Michael, and I mean, Undertow Publications have been putting out great work for years now, so I think it's brilliant that we have recognized their achievements within the genre. And in recent years, they've put out the new magazine, Weird Horror Magazine, and that is certainly something worth checking out as well.
Yes, do have a subscription to that, and I've received the. I just recently signed up for it, so I received the first issue of it, and really, really striking work in there. Good stuff. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah. Okay, well, now it is time for the Fiction Podcast of the Year. And the winner is The Other Stories by Hawk and Cleaver. And it is time to hear from Dan Wilcox and Luke Condor. Was Bob present for this conversation? Well, you'll have to make up your own minds. Is there an impression of Bob that is not actually Bob? Or is it him? Listen in and find out. It's Hawk and Cleaver on This Is Horror. Luke, Dan, welcome to This Is Horror.
Hello. Thanks, Matt. Yes.
And congratulations to The Other Stories on winning the Fiction Podcast of the Year.
Did it.
Very much.
Made it happen.
We've been
Thank you very much, guys.
trying to do this for a few years, right, Dan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been nominated a fair few years in a row, and wasn't expecting it again this year, but very, very obviously happy that it has finally come and that I can finally crack open that bottle of whiskey from when we expected to win it the first year, and it just didn't happen.
Well, I guess the good thing, with whiskey is it typically gets better with age anyway. So, the win will quite literally taste even better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a bit like the podcast as well. The podcast has definitely gotten better with age.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know what we're doing a bit more now.
Yeah, which is always helpful when you start a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, let's go all the way back to the beginning. I want to know about the Hawk and Cleaver origin story and the Other Stories podcast origin story.
Okay. Well, I think it was middle of 2015. We started Hawk and Cleaver, which was me and a couple of guys, Ben and Matt, and we were sort of self-publishing, and we just wanted to sort of self-publish with friends and turn it into like what we call the story studio. Pretty early on, maybe like a month in, Dan messaged us to sort of see what we were doing, and we were like, just join in. I don't really remember what happened then. We just ended up together pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, I think it was just off of the launch of my first novella, and I happened to come across Matt's work and got in contact with him, and then he kind of pulled me into the orbit of Hawk and Cleaver.
Yeah, we swallowed you up.
Yep.
And then I think it was like the I think it was like New Year's Day or something in 2016. It was very early on. We had like a little meeting and a little Skype chat and said, right, what do you want to do? We need to do some kind of group project. And we thought, okay, we wanted to do like a writing exercise, but also something that we could sort of like a writing exercise in public. So we said, okay, every month we'll set a theme, and all four of us will write a short story, 1,000-word short story in that theme, and then we'll publish it as a little KDP, little magazine, ebook sort of thing. And then I've been podcasting for a long time, and podcasting's always been kind of top of mind for me. So I said, let's turn those stories into a podcast. It shouldn't be too hard. And it wasn't. In the first few episodes were pretty much just someone, me or even Ben, or I think Dan, did you narrate an episode as well?
I did one or two, in the early days.
Yeah. And then, but the podcast like really took off quite quickly. I think it got like 5,000 downloads the first month, then 20,000 the next, and then it just kind of steamrolled and got bigger and bigger. So
it seemed like there was like a milestone every month.
It did,
somehow.
yeah. And then I think we kind of jettisoned the ebook aspect of it and just did the podcast, and we just refined it over time. Got more and more people involved, actual voice actors. We've got a team of about, I don't know, I think 25, maybe like 10 regular collaborators and like 25 to 30 overall sometime collaborators. Yeah.
The team has totally stretched, and it's been a fun journey of iteration. Like you say, in the beginning, it was just let's stick all these bits together and see what happens. But as the audience has grown, like you say, the team has grown, and then we've been much more deliberate with just reaching out to amazing talent, because in the first year or so, pretty much the entire operation, there was no income, there was no money exchange. It was just, you know, people who were passionate about telling story doing the story thing. And then as we've grown, and as you know, we've started to get a little bit of money from the podcast, we've always prioritized trying to make sure that everyone who's involved gets paid what they're worth, because we want people to be respected for their talent, and to make sure that, you know, while the podcast grows, obviously they grow, and it's just a really nice collaborative effort to see everyone working towards something that is so widely received.
Yeah, and so we refined the system over and over. Now, I mean, it's pretty. What was there's an analogy I used a while ago. Some sort of flywheel. Yeah, so it took a while to get the flywheel going, but now it feels like it'd be even more effort to stop it. Like if we were to say no more, we're not doing anymore, that feels like we'd be pushing against it. Like it's moving now on its own. One of us could disappear and it would continue on. Life is I don't know for how long, but
a sentient beast.
Exactly.
Can we also do a very quick shout out as well to Carl Hughes, who is one of our audio wizards, who basically started off quite early on by saying he'd edit maybe 2 or 3 podcast episodes just to help us out, and from that first one just hasn't not been involved with an episode in some capacity from, I don't know, 2017. And he definitely ramps up a lot of our audio quality and just kind of helps us where we get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Michael, I've got like a big thank you list of people. Shall I do that now or do that later?
Well, I mean, you can do it very soon, but I think just purely because you mentioned Carl Hughes, he is responsible for the This Is Horror theme. So that's the kind of audio magic that he can create. And then the person very wonderfully saying This Is Horror podcast is Persephone Rose. And they're another of your narrators, one of my favorites, in fact. Am I allowed to be biased? I don't know, but I just was. It's happened.
Yeah, Persephone's great. They've been with us for a couple of years, 2-3 years now, I think. Always, every single time, they blow it out of the park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, on that note, let's see your thank you list.
Well, okay, so I wrote some bits down here. The other story is kept alive by a huge number of talented writers, editors, and voice artists, and a cosmic Scottish hellbird called Kez. And of course, the many listeners of the show who tune in every week and stick something dark and bloody into their ears. I'd like to quickly thank Carl, Ben, Andy, Matt, Alexandra, Erica, Jasmine, Ian, Joshua, Justin, Persephone, Duncan, Josh, and I'm definitely missing people off the list, but it's okay because they have permission to eat my ears. So thanks very much for believing in the show and helping to make it happen. We love you all very much.
There we go.
Everyone's feeling wonderfully warm now.
All gooey inside.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And Josh Curran, who you mentioned, I mean, he's got a fantastic spin-off podcast as well, Miscreations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're expanding into a couple of different things with Hawk and Cleaver, aren't we? We've got a few different podcasts on the dashboard.
Yeah, maybe too many. I don't know, it feels like it's I don't know, it feels like there's a lot. I mean, at the minute now I'm kind of trying to get out, maybe I'm working on 4 different podcasts at any one time. But the other story is always kind of the main beast. So as long as that gets done, it's all good. But there's Horror Hangout where we do horror movie reviews with friends. There's Tales of What, as you mentioned, which is a bizarre fiction podcast. I do that seasonally. Great Writers Share, which is currently on a sort of hiatus, which I know you guys did the Great Writers Scare crossover episode.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When was that? That was Halloween.
October.
Yeah. Well, I'm interrupting, or at least attempting to interrupt. You're being very adamant and trying to power through this interruption, which is almost ruder than interrupting someone, in fact. But you just said that...
I'm very sorry.
Yeah, you're forgiven. But, I mean, you said that Great Writers Share is on a hiatus at the moment, so I'm intrigued. I'm a big fan of the Great Writer Share podcast, and I kind of thought that, it was over and you might come back in the future, but is this you suggesting that actually it's a bit more than might?
I don't want to step on any toes.
No, that's
but
fine. There are wheels turning in the background, and there should be some kind of news potentially the next 4 to 6 weeks. But it will all roundabout in a way saying it is coming back, but with a different face on.
Okay. Looking forward to it. Can't wait to see the face. Will it look like Kez? Will it look like John Crinan? We'll find out.
For anyone that hasn't listened to Michael David Wilson's interview on there, that was a fantastic chat that we had during the pandemic last year. And yes, also there was the Great Writers Scare episode that I very much enjoyed. That was recorded at like 5 in the morning for me.
Yeah, it was a bit of a rough time, yeah. But no, now we're talking at the dizzy heights of 9 a.m., so, no worries on that one.
No.
It's a bit early for you, though, isn't it, Bob? That's right. Yes, here I am. All I need to do is, if I just say, oh, but it's a bit early for you, isn't it, Bob? Get him to record yes tomorrow when I talk to him.
Just add a little grumble, a little.
Yeah. One of those, noises that Bob occasionally makes, and it's like, are you dying or are you coming? I'm not sure.
We love you, Bob.
Yeah. That's the noise I make when I eat cheese.
Oh my god. Well, there's no way to segue unless you met each other via cheese or coming, but how did the two of you meet?
Through Håkon Cleaver. So let's cut to 5-6 years ago. I was doing a podcast called Luke's Massive Storytelling Podcast Thing, which I've now recently made live again, and Michael's going to be appearing on an episode very shortly. And that podcast was all about me challenging myself to write short stories, make short films, and that kind of thing. And I also got other people on the show and challenged them. Oh, you should write a 10,000 word short story in a week. Whatever, I don't know what projects were. But Ben Errington was one of those guys, and Matthew Butcher was another one of those guys. So that's how we kind of started working together initially, the first 3 Håkon Cleaver people. And then Dan knew Matt through university.
It was a very convoluted roundabout way of saying it was that my ex used to teach piano and taught a 12-year-old girl whose mum knew Matt, and whose mum used to sit into the lessons when I sat in some of what is basically my living room at the time, and we'd chat about books. And then she found out I was writing, said that she knew Matt, who was self-publishing, and then I read one of Matt's books, reached out. There you go. So thanks to music,
yeah,
I got introduced to Matt digitally. But I think that's one of the incredible things about this whole operation is it's entirely digital. So many of us haven't met each other in person, and even the core 4 or 5 of us have only met up about 5 or 6 times in 6 years.
Yeah.
So for the whole thing to be able just to run across the internet is just mind blowing, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.